How do you know when to ramp up? People are the key issue. You talk to any small business person anywhere, and they'll always say it comes down to talent. My name is Lynn Hinderrocker. Thanks for tuning into NxBizSuccess. I've got a very successful small business person here in the Midtown area of Omaha, Nebraska. His name's Mike Berry. He owns Boulevard Gardens, which is a landscape design firm here in the Omaha area, as I mentioned. And Mike has gone through everything. He's hired people, fired people, and really understands what it takes to evolve a firm. And obviously, Boulevard Gardens has come a long ways. Congratulations on your growth, Mike.
Thank you.
You bet. How did you know, Mike, when it was time to bring somebody into your modest operation here at Boulevard Gardens? When did you know, I need help and I'm going to have to make the investment?
It's a tough question to determine, but at some point you can't replicate yourself. You realize that you are maxed out as an individual and that you really need help doing things like bookkeeping, or whether it's, in our case, maintaining a garden, and that to grow, to get more clients and make more money, you have to add staff. That's the only way that you can do it.
You have to create capacity, don't
Correct.
you? Yeah.
Correct, to take on more clients.
And the question is, do you add capacity at the high end where you bring somebody in who has approximately your same skill set, or do you first add capacity, as you mentioned, in the bookkeeping area or administrative tasks? Where do you start if you're going to bring somebody into your world?
Certainly in the production area, you need to add the high-end people. Workers who need direction are easier to find, and those people with an individual skill set that you require for whatever tasks or production you're doing or services are the key people that can then direct those team members, right, and service your clients.
Right. Now, obviously, all small business owners are concerned about costs and revenues and so on. How did it feel to you when you added your first person? Were you worried about, do I have enough money to really hire them? Or did business have to increase 17% to really justify that? Or how did you make that quantitative decision?
Well, in our case, it was fairly easy because we bill each client by the number of hours that were there. Okay. So when we added that person on, we were able to bill that out. But you definitely have to have capacity to do that. And so it is a scary thing. You feel like you're kind of going out on a ledge. Right. But hiring that first person allowed me to go out and sell more clients, and allowed me the time to go out and get more business to financially justify that new hire.
So it's supposed to work that way, isn't it?
It is.
You bring on the costs, and then you quickly go out and get some business to not only cover those costs, but make additional profits.
And I was fairly confident that I could do that. It certainly was going to take a lot of effort on my part. But
yeah. Now, just detail for me the chronological unfolding. So you added a professional first, like or a supervisor or a production person?
A supervisor or a crew leader.
Okay. And this is the landscaping business. So this is somebody who's out in the field, right, watching over materials and helping get rocks and plants and gardens coordinated.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And then what was the next thing that you did?
The next thing was internally, bookkeeping wise. After that, I realized I really couldn't do all of that as well. Yeah. And to be able to focus on designing for clients and servicing clients and attending to their needs, which of course generates more revenue, sure, I needed to have those tasks pulled away from me and done by a professional. But that's difficult because many entrepreneurs, including myself, have a lot of angst about delegating.
Yes.
They always feel like they could do it faster or better themselves, and I certainly went through some of that, so it's difficult.
Was the training process difficult? I mean, did it take weeks and months to to get everybody kind of trained, and did you go through a chaotic ramp-up period, or did they slip into place pretty quickly?
It depends on the skill level and the experience level that you're hiring, but yes, there's certainly a culture here at Boulevard Gardens, and we want to impart that on people and the way we do things. So that does take several weeks.
And I think it's fascinating. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Boulevard Gardens, small firm, and yet you quickly mentioned just now culture. Why don't you define for us what culture is? And I think it's so interesting that a small firm has a culture. Sometimes we think of that as a word that goes with a big corporation or something.
No, it's very important. It's the way that we approach our attitude towards clients and each other as team members. And we've had people who didn't fit the culture, who either were too independent, in the sense that they didn't want to be part of a team, and so they weren't able to take direction.
All right.
And that's certainly not something that works in our environment.
Yeah.
And we've also had people who had the wrong attitude towards clients, and of course that's very damaging to your firm's overall appearance.
How do you find these people? Just run an ad in the local newspaper or go on the internet, or is it a really a much more complex process to find the right person?
It's networking.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Okay.
It's also, it used to be the newspaper, and that has really sort of evolved, and we're using internet-based services now, and those have been very successful.
Good.
So.
How about the whole question about subcontractors versus employees? Obviously, if you have an employee, you got to go through the whole withholding and the payroll and all that. Did you go through that, or was it you knew right away how you wanted to handle that?
Well, it's twofold. There are certain aspects of our business that we are not experts at, and so we do find what we call preferred providers or partners to help us with those aspects of a landscape installation. And those are
subcontractors.
Correct, subcontractors, and
Or
those
1099 employees, they're called.
Yep.
Yep.
They're usually, though, typically companies in our case that we're delegating work to, and we're being the general contractor. Those are very difficult to find, and it's a weeding process, and we've had some bad experiences.
And when you make a mistake in their choice, sometimes it can really hurt the relationship with the client.
Right.
Right.
So that's
very tough.
When you find those partners, you need to really cultivate that relationship.
Now, a quick question about that. When they make a mistake, or when you bring them on board, do you hold them responsible? Like if they really mess up and cost somebody a lot of money, do you ultimately have to be responsible for that financially? Or would that subcontractor or small company have to step up and somehow compensate for any major financial situation?
If we're the general contractor, we are financially responsible for whatever mistakes they generate. So that's a situation that can get you in a lot of trouble if you don't understand. And especially these days, you can have a subcontractor go bankrupt on you, and that definitely can have some negative aspects.
Yeah, that happens.
Along with the quality of the work. And unfortunately, if the quality of their work isn't very good, it reflects on you. It doesn't reflect necessarily on them. So
right. Now, tell me about your staff briefly. You have how many people, and how many people doing this and what? And
we have about 15 people, another designer besides myself, a bookkeeper, and 4 crew leaders.
Okay, all right, good. And when you say crew leader, kind of like foremen, they're outside
Correct.
supervising small teams of people?
3 of those are actually managers, and we sort of differentiate that, but there is a 4th crew leader, and the managers have more responsibility.
Okay. As we kind of wrap up our interview here, and I've learned a great deal, Mike Berry, thank you very much for sharing your philosophy about staffing, because everybody has an idiosyncratic spin on, staffing and personnel and talent and so on. But as a leader and as an owner of a company, how have you evolved talking about staffing and running your company? What have you gone through? What suggestions would you give to somebody who's thinking about bringing on a small team and trying to grow, but wants to learn from you?
I think one of the most important things that was difficult for me to understand was the skills are important, but their ethics, their attitude about work are probably more important than the skills. The skills you can teach, but you can't teach someone to have a good attitude at work. You can't teach someone to be honest and trustworthy and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I think those are actually more important.
Wow, that's an insightful departure from conventional wisdom about staffing, where it's always, what have they learned? What's their resume say? What do they know? If they know the right things, we hire them and bring them in. And so I appreciate you sharing that very much. Michael Berry with Boulevard Gardens in Midtown, Omaha, Nebraska. I appreciate you sharing these insights. You've really gained a lot of recognition in the area with the local Chamber of Commerce and so on. You run a nice, tight business. Thank you very much for taking some time to watch NxBizSuccess. Learn from Michael Berry about how to staff your team. Do it selectively. Do it carefully. Know what's coming at you. My name's Lynn Hinderrocker. Keep it going and keep it growing.